Okay, good evening, everyone. It is 6 p.m., March 1st, 2021, and it's time to call the Franklin City Council meeting to order. Ms. Rhodes, roll call, please.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Austin?
Here.
Mr. Blankenship?
Here.
Mr. Hukin? Ms. Jones?
Here.
Ms. McGinnis?
Here.
Mr. Reinerson?
Here.
Mr. Taylor?
Here.
Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Brian Reese, will you please chair the pledge?
Yes, sir. Invite you to join me. Our Father, we come to you tonight, and we're so thankful for another wonderful day. We thank you for the warmer weather, the sunshine that's come on us. We're so grateful. And tonight I want to pray that you just guide and lead everything that takes place here. And I pray that you be with the decisions that are made, give guidance to these public servants here on our council. We do thank you for our nation, for protect our military, be with our state, our city, especially when we pray that you be with our first responders, protect them, guide them. Thank you for their service. Look forward to all that's going to get accomplished tonight, and we pray you continue to guide our great city. In Jesus' name, amen. Stand for that.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. Is there any announcements, presentations, or public comment? It's not on the agenda. Okay, hearing none, we'll close that. We're ready for the consent agenda. However, I just want to say welcome Kimberly Shoemaker from Mayor's Youth Council for sitting on the board tonight. So thank you. Okay, so that gets us to the consent agenda.
Mayor, I move to approve the consent agenda as written. Second.
Motion is second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, we will go right into the old business, which is public hearing.
Move to read old business by title only.
Second.
Motion and a second by Mrs. McGinnis to read old business by title only. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none. Next three items will be public hearing. And we have
Yes, sir. These are advertised public hearings for this evening in front of the council. We have three of them. And the mayor, as administering the public hearings, we are setting some time frames so that they're equal for everybody, just as we do at the planning commission level, just as we do our other board meetings. We give 20 minutes to anybody who's a petitioner making a presentation. Then we give 20 minutes to the interested parties in response to that. Then we give 10 minutes for rebuttal to whoever petitioner. No requirement that you take up that was at the time, Mr. Barrett, but it's completely up to you. That you take up that time, and then we close the public hearing. At that point in time, the council members, as the elected officials, can then ask questions of anyone they wish, whether it be petitioner, interested parties, demonstrators, staff, or whatever. But once we close the public hearing, then it becomes the discussion of you decision makers. So just keeping track of those reminders tonight, and I will keep the official iPhone timer as best I can. Having said that, I believe the first matters.
Thank you, Mrs. Craig. Okay, Common Council Ordinance number 21-04, the ordinance amending ordinance number 92-16 to change the administration of the physical agility test required for enrollment of an application as a member of the Franklin Police Department. And allow the Mayor and Commission to place a member of the Franklin Police Department subject to criminal charges on a paid or unpaid administrative leave of absence. Police Merit Attorney William Barrett. And City Attorney over. Thank you, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, council members. Thank you for your time. It's only been a few days since I was last before you, so I will abide by Ms. Gray's admonition and not take up much of your time. I'll just remind you that there are three salient items that we're trying to seek amendment for to improve the process. One is the additional physical agility test at the beginning of our process to weed out people who are physically unqualified. The second is the authority at the other end of the process, in the event discipline is required, the authority of the Merit Commission to suspend an officer without pay in the case of a criminal prosecution. And the third is your authorization for the merit board and the department to prepare a program of lateral hiring of officers subject to your later approval. We don't have the form in front of you now. We'll prepare it if you authorize this, and we'll come back later for your ultimate authorization. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Okay, this is open for public hearing, so if anyone in the audience have any questions for Mr. Barrett while he's here, please ask now.
Mayor, while folks are, I would just like to remind the council that the agility test, we're doing it at the front end. It is already required at the back end, just so we're going to add an agility test. It's not as if we're inserting something that's not already required. It just does, as Mr. Barrett so eloquently said last time, it makes no sense to have somebody go through the whole process and not be able to do the agility test after you spent that kind of money and time. So we're just adding one on the front end to hopefully narrow the process down. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so I would, at this time, is there any, again, public hearing? Anyone hearing, seeing nobody move? Ask the questions. I'll close the public hearing on ordinance number 21-04. Does the council have any questions for Mr. Barrett or Mrs. Gray? And if not, we're ready for some kind of action.
Mayor, I make a motion to approve common council ordinance number 21-04.
Second. I think that's second was Mr. Taylor. Was it Chris?
Ms. Wright.
Down here.
Okay. All right. So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, we'll see you soon, Mr. Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Appreciate your help very much.
Okay, next item. Common Council ordinance number 21-03, an ordinance rezoning certain property to RS2 residential suburban 2. With comments to be known, with commitments to be known as Flagstone Properties rezoning. Senior Planner Joanne Myers.
Good evening. As mentioned at the introduction at the last meeting, the request before you is for rezoning of 57 acres that is located west of Cumberland Trails and Cumberland Trace, and is located north of Westview Drive. The request is to rezone it from RS1 to RS2 with commitments. At the time of application, the petitioner submitted the three commitments that are outlined both in the staff report and also the ordinance before you. This went before Planning Commission at the December meeting in 2020 due to a lack of majority vote of the Planning Commission members. It was then automatically continued for lack of action to the January meeting. At the January meeting, any member of the Planning Commission that was not in attendance in December was provided a link to the audio recording of the meeting itself, and also a draft of the December minutes was provided to them, so that way they had all the information that was presented at the December meeting at the January meeting. At that January 19th meeting, the petitioner came before them again and had discussions. The Planning Commission did forward an unfavorable recommendation to City Council by a vote of 6-5. There's a little bit of nuances with this particular ordinance. Both Lynn and I have discussed this, as neither of us have ever experienced an unfavorable recommendation with commitments being forwarded to City Council. Typically, the way the ordinances are then written is based off of, there's a lot of language in there, based off of Planning Commission's favorable recommendation. This ordinance is provided before you with information behind that. Since that was not the case,
Something went wrong. Please try again.
Mr. Coffey, you have something to say? That's not counting on anybody's time.
So in regard to that, Lynn and I discussed it. The ordinance before you, as written, is that the request is to rezone the property from RS1 to RS2 with commitments. And that language is provided within the ordinance before you. Also included in that ordinance by state statute, the certified recommendation from Plan Commission has been forwarded to you, which is unfavorable. In your packet, you received a memo. You also received a copy of the staff report that was before Plan Commission. The one in here, there are areas that were highlighted in yellow. Those were the areas that differed from the December meeting to the January meeting. The reason that information was added was based off the discussion that was had in the December meeting, and clarification from staff was provided to both the public, the petitioner, and the Plan Commission. Also included in your packet is a copy of the RS1 and RS2 standards. The main difference between the two zoning classifications is the RS1 allows a minimum of lots at 100 foot in width and 15,000 square foot in area, while the RS2 is 75 feet in width at 10,000 square feet in area. Any information that was provided by the petitioner or interested parties that attended the meeting or submitted documentation directly to staff is also provided in this staff report for you. A copy of the conceptual plan that was presented by the petitioner is included. As I mentioned, and also the December minutes and the January minutes. So you have before you everything that we have as staff and Plan Commission forwarded to you. In regard to the difference of the ordinance, and Lynn and I have discussed kind of procedurally, what is before you, as I mentioned, is the request to rezone it from RS1 to RS2 with commitments. If there are any modifications that either the petitioner presents, interested parties present, or city council members present, that they would like to make amendments to the ordinance, that is something that can occur this evening, and it would just take action and motions. Lynn can explain that a little bit further.
Sure. And as you all know, you've also received emails and some things from the interested parties, adjoining property owners. Those are all part of your packet. And I think one of the things that I mentioned, I want to clarify, the way the process works is an ordinance comes before you as the council members. You get a planning commission recommendation, and they did not recommend approval of the ordinance. But you don't pass an ordinance not to have an ordinance. So the ordinance that is before you is requesting to amend the zoning map from RS1 to RS2. That's how it is presented, and so that's the thing that you're acting upon. You may either approve the ordinance as making the zoning change from RS1 to RS2 with conditions that the petitioner has offered, or you can approve RS1 to RS2 with additional commitments, or you can deny the ordinance. So those are the three ordinances. So you don't pass an ordinance saying you don't want an ordinance. So I just want to clarify that, because there are several parties that have been available or have been participating from the planning commission level, and they're here tonight. And I think that was a bit confusing. So the planning commission said we did not recommend approval. But the ordinance to come before you has to be one asking for rezoning, and you would grant it, we deny it, we would make it subject to conditions. So does that clarify, perhaps for all of them? Additionally, you have 7 elected officials who make these final decisions. 6 of you are present tonight. Pursuant to statute, when you have ordinance amendments, it requires that a majority vote of the legislative body occur, that you must have a majority vote. That means you have to have 4 of the 6 that are here, either denying it or granting it. So a 3-3 means we'll come back again until we get to it. So a majority vote of the entire membership, not just a majority vote of the people that are here tonight.
It doesn't work like the lottery.
It is not. It requires a majority of the entire legislative body, which are all of you, all 7 elected officials.
Okay. So, before we go into public hearing, do the council have anything they want to ask Joanna? Or do we just go right into the public hearing and then address them?
Well, I think it would make sense to have a public hearing so you can hear both sides, concerns, questions, and those kinds of things. And then once we close the public hearing, you, as the elected officials, can ask as many questions of whoever it is that you wish to ask questions of. What we do is we close the public hearing, and then you can ask those questions.
Okay, so at this point, we will open it up to public hearing. Anybody who wants to speak, please.
We'd start with petitioner. The petitioner gets 20 minutes. Go ahead.
So,
Yeah.
let's hear the petitioner.
And if he doesn't use it, then we stop.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Kirk. I'm an attorney for Flagstone Properties LLC, which is the petitioner in this case. On the phone is my business partner, David Lexi, also an attorney who represents Flagstone Properties LLC. And with me in person is Dane Waldman, here in the camo jacket in the middle, and he is one of the members of Flagstone LLC. He will also be available to potentially answer any more specific questions related to his plans on the development side. I do not claim any expertise on how to build anything. So again, thank you, Joanna, for the introduction, and she's given the procedural history where we sit, and obviously Ms. Gray has let me know what we're asking you to do today on behalf of Flagstone Properties. My role then is to try to at least summarize why we believe this is a benefit to the residents of this city. The initial review of this property as zoned in an RS1 does not appear to be economically feasible, given there's a significant drainage issue on that parcel. It means that we're, in any development, going to have to address it through likely the use of one or more ponds, and obviously the interconnection to make that work for the new pavement that's going to go in, whether or not it's an RS1 or RS2. The RS2 designation, though, it changes how many properties can be placed into this location and increases the density slightly. And I'll get into some more specific examples of what those numbers actually mean from our perspective, but that's the summary of why we'd be asking to change it from one to the other. I think you've already managed to do what I was going to request, which was to turn to this particular page so you can see where the property is and what physically we're looking at. And if you look at that map just briefly, down the west side or the left side of this particular slide, you can see the creek running through there. And along the base, it's at least somewhat apparent that it does slope down toward that. So the entire area and along the borderline of that, we're going to have to address quite a bit of water runoff. And that just increases the costs of putting any sort of community in there, even as it's currently zoned. In listening to the different concerns that have been raised in hearings prior to this date, at least generally speaking, we think there were two primary concerns from the community. One was a flooding concern. I alluded to that. Putting in a new development, you're going to have a lot more surface or blacktop area, and obviously you're going to have runoff and a problem that in an area that already has runoff problems. But as a general development position, we are already going to put in a pond and obviously make that as a retention area to allow the drainage to slowly transmit from that particular neighborhood out into, say, the creek. And that should alleviate actually the current problems, or at least some of the problems that are being created by the property even undeveloped. The primary difference here, again, is that in RS1, I think Joanna had alluded to this before or mentioned specifically, each lot must be at least 15,000 square feet. In asking for an R2 zoning classification, it allows us to shrink the lots to as little as 10,000 square feet. However, the plan that we've developed, which I believe is maybe 2 pages past the current picture, if you don't mind. Oh, there it was. Thank you. And this is being planned. That creates lots on average with a size of about 11,400 square feet. So for the most part, the development will have a varied size in lots. They won't all be at the minimum. They may be a little larger in many instances. They would, of course, meet the minimum in an RS2 classification. As a comparison with one of the neighborhoods that's already developed off to the east, as you can see in that particular slide, there's Cumberland Trace and Cumberland Trails. Those are zoned RSN, another residential designation, and those have a rough range of square footage between 9,800 square feet and 10,200 square feet. So these will be larger than generally the surrounding communities, even under RS2 as we're proposing here. One of the commitments, so the first commitment here would have been to address the flooding and management, wastewater, the stormwater management through the inclusion of the retaining pond, as you see there. So that will help, again, not an engineer, but that will help alleviate the runoff and flooding problem that currently exists with some of the development around it and this particular parcel, but would exist certainly if there was not another plan in place. Another part of implementing this development plan includes review and protection of any stones and monuments that may be in the area. So far, none have been reviewed, but that is certainly one of the promises and commitments being made today. And Flagstone is well aware that retainage ponds have become a part of municipalities' stormwater system and plans. However, we recognize that maintaining those ponds, unless properly configured, can pose another challenge for local municipalities. One of the commitments, by including this pond, is to, of course, try to make sure that it is maintained by the residents and not by the city, so it's not an additional expense. In doing so, this, as planned, will have a 20-foot common area around the pond so that it's properly owned by a homeowners association to be established as a part of this development. That means that if the pond requires maintenance, the owners association can perform it and the city will not have to work with potentially multiple homeowners to get the maintenance done. The common area, including the retention pond, will make the property less prone to flooding than it currently is. Another one of the commitments related to this, of course, is to make a commitment in terms of producing the pond, to bring that before the Johnson County Drainage Board. So it's proposed as this, but we would review it with them to ensure that it is properly done within the county's requirements. If we had to amend the design, then we would do so pursuant to the variance. Another one of the commitments the Planning Commission and proposed as a part of this ordinance would be to incorporate a trail. If you see on that same slide, there's a dashed line that is on the west-hand side that trails through the bottom side. The green there being common areas, but that would be a trail that will allow pedestrian or bike use and connects to either proposed trails within the Franklin system or trails that already exist on the very northwest quadrant and then the southeast quadrant. That would be one of the commitments, again, to make the S2 a little bit higher density, more palatable. At least as drawn here and considered, the trail would add about 3,000 square feet of additional length. And again, as I mentioned, connects 2 points on the north and south and in your fairly important trail system. That will also be built within the common area and should be a part of the maintenance of the HOA. So the city here, again, would not be picking up the tab for those repairs. One of the things in addressing the flooding concern, of course, that results is that there's quite a bit of common space that's created here, and hopefully that is also a beautification issue for the folks that live on the edge and potentially in development. The other primary concern that we saw out of comments was a traffic concern. As you can see here, you can go back to 2 pages. Thank you. The development of this property, regardless of how it's classified, is going to impact the traffic flow in the communities there to the right or to the east of it. There are 2 predominant pathways for streets, Crabapple and Campbell. And I'll get into a little bit more specifics of like the numbers that we would anticipate between the 2. In a preliminary site plan, in mocking it up as you had just seen on page 17, or this is a similar fashion, the S1 designation allowed for about 104 lots. If we push that into an S2 classification, which allows for slightly more density, it allows us in that particular plan to build out 125 lots. That's the difference of only 21 lots, but it helps us financially make the project viable. So either way, whether it's S1 or S2, at the end of the day, there are only 2 access points currently stubbed to this location. As you can see, although not terribly clearly out of that picture, in Crabapple and then in Pamela. Both those are currently stubbed and ready for development in the anticipation of development, but have no through traffic as of today. Clearly, the residents that live on either side of those streets as they are will have concerns about traffic, but the way they're operating today doesn't reflect what this city had planned for in the future, one way or the other. And from our perspective, the difference of 21 homes or approximately 10 new households is not a material difference in terms of, or will not likely result in material difference in traffic flow between an S1 or S2 plan. And although I think everybody hopes that the current situation with the pandemic changes over time, most are predicting that some change in behavior as it relates to commuting is going to happen long term. So to the extent that we can take today's results, how people are commuting or dealing with work, one of the benefits from that type of change would be that any impact in terms of traffic increase is likely to be reduced other than it would have been, say, maybe 5 years ago. I'll close in discussing a few more benefits of permitting Flagstone to undertake this particular development. Mr. Waltman is an owner of Flagstone and manager of Fisher Excavating, which we retained to undertake much of the site preparation work at the proposed development. Fisher Excavating, not here today though, employs nearly 100 people on the south side of Indianapolis, including the Franklin area. Many of Fisher's employees, approximately 30 or 40, call Franklin home. So part of this is trying to work with somebody who has local connections, employs local people to do work in the locality. There are additional commitments that have been made, which Joe and I have also reviewed as included in the packet. And those include some related to the actual design of the homes that would be developed here. So to briefly review those, that would impact the roof overhang, garages, corner lots, and include monotony clause, with the idea of presenting a more aesthetically pleasing community that's responsive to the overall comprehensive plan and the design for the city. Flagstone has reviewed each of those commitments, including the ones related to addressing the drainage, the trail, and the like, and has agreed to provide them. The presented ordinance would likely need to be modified further to reflect all of the commitments or anything agreed to this evening, if that were the case. But they're here in good faith to try to make this development work if it still can be done within the budget based on an S2 classification. The summary then, is that Flagstone is requesting that this council approve the rezoning from RS1 to RS2 as described in the ordinance, which may be further amended to include certain additional amendments that we've already discussed or at least alluded to today. And I'd like to thank Ms. Myers and the Planning Commission again for their time and effort in assisting us in building this and figuring out the best way to move forward to present this plan to the commission. That's all I have is direct comments. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So with that being said,
We have interested parties and demonstrators, they're all one group and they have 20 minutes.
so at this time, we'll open it up to interested parties that are here to voice your opinion. You have 20 minutes collectively. The clock's not started until you get to the podium. So anybody want to get up and speak? Yes, sir. Mayor, City Council.
Yes.
Oh, did I go up there?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, please.
Name and
Oh, I'm William Clark. I'm also from the Franklin Mayor's Youth Leadership Council, and I live near this area. And something I've noticed is that this is like as he said, it's like heavily flooded area. Usually, that's a little bit on the hill, a little bit we're talking about. But also another thing is that creeks in Indiana, especially since they're low lying, often have a very large floodplain around them. They're also subject to move, like, out of their beds and over time. So I don't know if there's, I just maybe a question for you is that will there be measures taken to maybe prevent the creek from shifting into a position where it would be like in the subject property or where it could pose a greater list of flood danger?
so I think that's a great question. And I think what we need to do is probably collect all the questions and answer them all at once. So
Okay.
that's a question, that's a good one. You got any-
No, that's it.
Okay, so is there anybody else that, thank you. Is there anyone else that has concerns? Yes.
And as she's making her way to the podium, Mayor, you're right, what typically happens, that's why there's 10 minutes for the rebuttal. The petitioner would be expected to answer any questions, and then we'll close the public hearing. You are free to ask questions to anybody.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Sheila Wooten, and I live at the end of the Cumberland Trails, down in the corner of Matthews Court. So I'm very familiar, we've been there for 23 years with the flooding that takes place out there. The property that he's discussing is north of that, so there really isn't flooding up there. Our concern is, the amount of, as he said, the asphalt, the concrete, that's going to cover that land. Because if you know the topography there, that is, the elevation, as he pointed out, is much higher. So any water from there also drains down, and of course Canary Creek is overflowing, and then the other creek behind. I'm just really concerned that they think they can address it, but I'm not a developer, I don't know, but I know it's not a perfect world. And when they're done, we're still there. And I'm not really sure how only 104 properties, when you go from, 15,000 down to 10,000, how you can only lose 21 properties. Our estimation was more like 75 or 80 properties as opposed to 125 properties. But again, I'm not a developer, so I'm just questioning. I haven't seen a drawing. Did you draw one up and see how many properties you could actually put in an RS1 on that property? And the difference is, how many homes have just one car? They're going to have 2, 3 cars. And yes, maybe times have changed and there's going to be more people working from home, but they still go to school. They still go to the store. There are 2 entrances into that addition, and the way for them to come in and out of that addition is going to be on Westview Drive, which is already a problem because few people do the speed limit as they come from the 144, 44 corridor and come around there and speed around there. It's already difficult enough to get out of our addition. And you add 125 homes with 2 cars each, That's 250 cars coming and going. They either got to come out on Westview Drive, or they've got to weave their way all the way through it and go out by Matlock, up on that road. That's a lot of cars for 2 ways to get in and out. That is a concern as well. And I know they've included all of the properties of the newer Cumberland Trace in their numbers for matching. But if they just did Cumberland Trails, those are bigger lots. Some of them are smaller, but several of them are bigger. And they would match more with the RS1 as opposed to the RS2. It just seems to me that there's enough properties around, if they want an RS2, there's already some that have been designated as RS2s. Why change what you guys already foresaw as an RS1 to an RS2? I think that's all I have. Thank you for hearing our concerns. I appreciate it. Appreciate what you do for our city.
Well, thank you, and
And you still have 15 minutes and 8 seconds.
Somebody else maybe can say something.
My name's Ron Bray, I live on Matthews Court. Our property would back up to over here on the, anyway. When they've already built Cumberland Terrace since we moved here. Now you're getting ready to put in another one. Well, some of the residents here know that when they put in the new addition, the truck traffic going in and out around the pond was coming in the wrong way. I drove a truck for 30 years. It was very dangerous. I mean, you got a semi-truck driving out of our addition on the side that most traffic is coming in. They were running over the plants, the rocks. Luckily, they didn't run over no people. But there was times that I came home from work and I'm coming into our addition off of Westview Drive, and here comes an 18-wheeler with a bulldozer on it coming straight at me. There's not room. Now, these developers can say all they want, but truck drivers are hard-headed, and I'm one.
You're one of them.
I appreciate what you do for our city, but I just don't see the need to put all this in there. Has any of you been across 144 over the Little Creek and seen the flooding since the rain began on Saturday? I mean, that field is flooded on the, well, as you're going east, it'd be on the south side of that road. And with all this asphalt and concrete, where's the water gonna go? I know they said they addressed it, but, you know, I've got some land down in Florida in the swamp I could probably turn into development. So, thank you for your time.
Hey, sir, just so you know, I got CDL driver's license, just so you know. And I was the guy that hauled the heavy equipment through the subdivisions. So,
You're right, they're hard out. You're right.
So I might have seen him coming up with the bulldozer.
thank you, sir. Is there anyone else, please, that have any comments? Okay, we got how many minutes for?
If they don't use it, then we move on to the rebuttal
All right,
stage.
so one more shot here. Does anybody want to speak?
You may ask, because we did publish, remember Governor Holcomb's order lasts through the end of March, so if there's anyone on the phone who has, that's an interested party, we should probably ask that as well.
Okay, is there anyone online that want to, on the phone, that want to speak? Okay, hearing none, and I'll ask one more time, does anybody else in the audience want to speak? So here, yes, sir.
Hi, I'm Tim Curry. I'm on Northcraft, so I'm on that map as well. Been here for 2 years. It was from Avon, where we had in my subdivision a lot of development like this, and the difficulty we have was getting in and out of the subdivision. I think someone also mentioned that, so that's my concern, is traffic and being able to get out of the subdivision and then coming in and turning left into the subdivision off of, I think it's Westview. So that, I just wanted to also add to that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay, anyone else? Okay, seeing no one jumping up,
This Carol.
I will close the public hearing.
No, we actually have a rebuttal, and then we close the public hearing.
Yeah, we're good.
It's been a lot of time.
Do we get to rebut his rebut?
So the intent is everybody.
To rebut, if there is anything to rebut.
So we're ready for the rebuttal whenever you guys get ready.
If there is any. No?
Thank you. As I mentioned, I build nothing, so what I'm going to do is, some of these are fairly, or maybe technical information could be better presented rather than a summary of what would be, with the caveats being, at least to start, on the pond side, clearly we would be producing that with oversight from the local county, and those requirements will limit what we can and cannot do, and they must be responsive to the exact same concerns that they raise here. Go ahead.
Good evening, my name is Dane Walton, I'm with Flagstone Properties. Hope I can answer a few of these questions and move forward here. The young gentleman had a question about the creek. It's called avulsion. It happens over time. There's not a lot that you can really do with the creek itself. You're kind of limited on what you can do. That whole area down through there, if you look at what we're doing with our map, what we're trying to do is we're trying to present an enormous amount of green space that's actually going to be a benefit to the residents. That creek, we're not messing with the creek. We're only going to be outletting into the creek. The pond is an enormous pond. I think, Mark, you had went over this at one point about the 2 to 10 and the 10 to 100 year detention requirements when a pond's built. Your runoff rates, I know people don't have a hard time understanding this, but your runoff rates post-development have to be less than pre-development. So even though you're adding the rooftops, you're adding the pavement and stuff, these ponds, they work to collect all this water. The ponds rise, and then there's small orifices that release that water at a very slow rate. So it actually helps areas of poor drainage and flooding downstream because of the release rates. So to answer your question about the creek, we're not going to be messing with the creek. We're going to leave that creek alone. It's nice. I think probably kids get down there and play in it. I know I would have when I was a kid. The other question that there was about I think some lady had mentioned something about the number of lots. Yeah, we actually did do a layout, part of our due diligence. We did get that many lots, but again, when you get into the economics of it and trying to keep the green space that we're wanting to keep, we're not just wanting to pound a bunch of houses all down through that area. We wanted to be able to have some nice character to this. It's a beautiful piece of property. So we did do it, and it is only losing about 18 to 21 lots. The truck traffic and construction traffic, I get that out on the roadways all the time. I think truck drivers can be a little boneheaded sometimes, but.
What'd you look right at me for?
Well, I was looking past you actually, kind of looking at the whole board. It is a concern. I live in a neighborhood myself, and it does get a little infuriating, but I think that's just what happens with growth and development. These two streets have been stubbed to go to this development, this property to the west for a long time. I know Cumberland Trace just got built out, but these streets were stubbed for a reason. The size of the lots was another thing somebody had mentioned. I think, Joanna, you had put together a nice spreadsheet outlining the different size lots in Cumberland Trails and Cumberland Trace. We're exceeding our minimums by quite a bit, and we're trying to make, actually, we agreed to, I think, just about every commitment that was requested of us to move forward. So if I'm missing another one, I apologize. I've got it, this is my handwriting, so I'm only good at reading my own handwriting. Not that yours is bad, it's just my eyes are used to my handwriting. But if I missed something, I apologize. I tried to remember everything that was asked. And I hope that does address some of the concerns.
Okay. So,
With that, then you can close the public hearing, and then it opens up to the board, and they can ask questions of anyone.
okay, so we have nothing else, correct? So,
At least one thing I would like to add is, going off of what Stefan was saying, it's not feasible to do this development at the R1 standards. We've gotten these really close, and I think we're at an unbelievable compromise. We've actually added 2,975 feet of walking trail through here. It's a pretty good clip of trail, and we feel it's going to be a very nice addition here to Franklin. We've worked really hard to try to make this work and agree to making all the commitments that were requested of us.
okay, so at this point, we will close the public hearing and then open it up for council questions. So, council can ask, like you said earlier.
Council can ask staff, our city engineer, each other, homeowners, police, they can ask anybody they want to.
Developer.
Anybody they want to, that's right.
I have a question. What is the average price range that you anticipate of homes in this area ranging between? Do you have an estimate on that at this point, or is it too early?
I don't at this time, no, I do not.
Okay.
So you guys don't have an idea, you're gonna be building $150,000 houses or $250,000 houses?
At this time, no, we don't. I know with the wider lots, they're probably gonna be on the higher end, just because of the lot size.
Do you know who's going to be the builders of these homes?
I do not. No contract.
Dane, why would you say that? No one who just bought your company.
Well, they're not here right now.
I think it's Arbor Homes, just to get it out there, because I had some councilmen ask me, and I think I know a little bit. Arbor Homes bought your company, correct?
They did. They bought,
Okay.
well, not my company, Fisher Contracting.
Fisher Contracting. Is this your development or Fisher development?
Well, me and Mr. Fisher are in partners. We do Flagstone Development. That's a separate thing than Fisher Contracting.
So chances are it's going to be Arbor Homes.
There is a possibility.
Which is fine, I'm just wondering, why don't you just say that?
Well, because I don't know, we don't have to deal with anybody, so.
Okay.
At this point in time.
Okay.
So I had a couple questions. Mark, is there a blister or turn lane on Westview Drive at the entrance to the subdivision? Right here.
Yes,
Yes, yes.
Or I
yes,
say
there's a small one.
blister, or people can drive by without having to stop.
There's an XL lane, a decel lane, and a passing blister.
So there are all three. That's what I thought. I just wanted to verify and make it
And they
on
do.
record.
They don't slow down.
Mark, also another question. Can we route construction traffic through the north side and not the south side?
No. That'd be worse.
Folks could interfere with her recordings, please let them answer.
I think that's something that Ms. Gray would probably have to be involved in the decision on that because they are public streets.
Okay.
I don't know that we can restrict that traffic. We can certainly suggest that if that's a better route to get into the subdivision. I don't know, okay, one way or the other, if we can actually restrict that traffic.
I'm trying to help. Say that, is there?
Yeah.
And on the south side there as well, that could come off west of you, that would be, could be used as a construction entrance versus.
They would have to cross the private property.
Okay.
And I agree with Mark, unless we went through a full ordinance changing our roads and things like that, we could, we would request it. And to be frank, enforcement would be the issue.
Right.
So as a member of the Plan Commission Board, I think there was a lot of confusion, and I've kind of already talked to Joanna about this a little bit, but I just want to go on record. This development is going to happen whether it's RS1 or RS2, correct? Is that correct?
A development can happen.
Any development?
Yes. Now, who it will be, you don't know.
Right.
But it would be this developer or not.
The rezoning request doesn't mean that a subdivision cannot be constructed on the ground as it currently stands. Yes, a subdivision can be constructed as long as it meets all the other city and county requirements.
Thank you.
So we ran into this recently, and over by Windstar, right? I mean, similar situation
Yes.
of rezoning and so on and so forth. You know, people living on stub streets, not wanting that stub street to continue on. And that's tough. That's a tough call because, as our attorney just said, there's going to be a subdivision built there at some point. So you guys have to understand that's going to happen. So I just want to say that as well. I've got a couple other, I know, Joanna, you talked about staff recommendations. I see an A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H.
Yes.
So I have A being all ponds located within the subject property, blah, blah, blah. B being if any stones or monuments. C, subject property is partially located. D, internal trail system to be added. E, roof overhang. F, garages. G, corner lot dwellings, and then H, anti-monotony.
Correct, that was in the staff report. Those were also the commitments that the petitioner agreed to at the planning commission stage. Based off of what I heard this evening is they're still willing to offer those commitments. They're currently not in the ordinance before you, however, because the application that was made to planning commission only included commitments A through C.
But if this commission, council determined that they wanted to move forward with it, we can ask that those be added, correct?
Correct, sir.
Thank you.
And Mr. Austin, you asked the question about Windstar. When a rezoning is done, any commitments that are made carry forward with the rezoning.
Okay.
So let's assume, and I'm just answering questions, it is your decision. If you were to rezone it with the commitments we just outlined, and say someone else came along and purchased the property, they would have to comply with those rezoning commitments.
I see.
That's why we rezoned, one of the reasons we rezoned Windstar after the development came in, because if the development stalls, or if a development property gets sold, we're making sure those commitments run with the land, not the development.
What's it called? What was the name of the subdivision they built?
The Biloxi Industries.
Biloxi, excuse me. That's the subdivision I was talking about.
Yes.
And it seems to me that what we've done is that with these zoning restrictions or the S1, S2, there's not a lot of commitments that these builders have to do, it seems, other than building these particular homes. I'm a little bit upset that it's not going to be a dollar amount. I would assume that these would be $250,000 homes.
Typically at the rezoning stage, in a lot of cases, it's not part of the discussion. when we get to, primary plat, there we go, change names in there, but primary plat. At that time, sometimes there's discussions at that point, but not always at rezoning. It can be, yes, if somebody comes forward with a builder that they're moving forward with.
So I hope the constituents here tonight understand that what the city's trying to do is get the builder to build a better home, a larger lot home, with the roof overhang requirements, the garages, all dwellings that just have a minimum of 2-car garage. 3-car garage should have a separate door, shall be required to be recessed from other bays, which is what I see in your subdivision. Corner lot dwellings. Those dwellings built on corner lots should include a minimum of 1 window per story of a minimum size of 2 foot by 4 foot on the sides of the dwelling facing the streets, which is only, to me, it's normal, but to some builders, that's not normal. Anti-monotony, I think that's critical. So you don't have the same house sitting next to the same house and right across the street. We did that at Beatrice. So I hope that you constituents understand that something's going in there. It's going to go in there. Sometimes things that happen, they happen above and beyond what we can control. So I want you guys to know that the city's trying extremely hard to get a quality product on that property. And flooding, my main concern, I drove over there, looked around, thought, holy cow, there can't be building houses there. Until I went and drove through and looked at it, saw it was pretty, on a high level there. And then to the southwest was where the flooding was happening. So, yeah, I think it's serious. And, yeah, I appreciate you guys letting me talk. Just have concerns as well.
Thank you. Anybody, any other council questions?
Do we need to even, before it's written, how do we go about putting in those recommendations to make sure that they are intact if we plan to vote for it? Because I know there's only 3 that are in there, there's extras that they had mentioned that they would do what we need to do.
That's where we would have our attorney lead us by hand.
And you tell me what you, but if that's what you wanted to do, you could either approve it as presented, again, that's the beginning. You could approve it with commitments and add whatever commitments you want. And those are zoning commitments, they run with the land, or they deny. Those are the 3 options. And then we would bring the actual final ordinance back to you with those additional commitments. But I have heard tonight, and it would be helpful if you got it on the record, sir, that you have agreed to commit to the ones that have been proposed. Doesn't mean they're going to approve it, the additional ones that have been proposed, correct? In addition to, that is part of the record.
Yeah, I'd be happy to, again, it's items E, F, G, and H, the roof overhang, the garages.
Yeah. And the original ordinance only had C, there was no internal trail.
Oh, I'm sorry, and the internal trail as well, and the anti-monotony.
So D, E, F, G, and H.
In addition to A, B, and C.
Obviously.
Correct.
Any other questions? Anybody, Danny, you look concerned? No. Okay. Any other questions, Chris? Do you have any?
No, I drove out there and looked at this property, because flooding was a concern for me too. And again, Joanna and I pulled up a map of what happened in 2008. None of that subject property, except for maybe the very slight, I think, southwest corner of it, was actually had water that year. And there's not going to be any homes, according to that map, on that property. So that was kind of a concern for me that got answered along the way.
Yeah, I learned a lot from Mark concerning water runoff. That pond controlling the flow of water. I'm no engineer, but it's interesting data and information. And it's also helpful too that this would be built with the approval of the county standards as well. City standards, but is that the county, what's the county, how are they involved?
Because it's in a legal drain watershed and
Okay.
would be outletting to a legal drain, they would be required to go through the Johnson County Drainage Board
Okay.
to meet those requirements specifically.
Which is also important.
Correct.
Yeah, our ordinance says the rate of runoff post-development cannot exceed the rate of runoff pre-development. Doesn't mean there won't be more water, of course there will.
Sure.
Impervious surfaces. But that's why they build ponds.
Any other questions? Comments?
Well, I was gonna say, Jim, I know during the, I believe it was the January Plan Commission meeting, we did have a lady that was concerned about, you know, the traffic and things like that. Again, when I went out there, there is parking only on one side of the street. There are signs that say that. She brought up, you know, the fact that you couldn't get an ambulance down there. It's wide. It's wide enough. So I know that was another concern too. You know, if we have to work with the police department to, you know, control that a little bit better, if there is parking on the other side of the street and blocking access, you know, maybe that's something we can do.
Chris, I think the fire chief.
So, Chris, I would just tell you, we have, the issue is mostly fire trucks. Ambulances are basically the same size as most trucks.
Right.
And we have and I bicker with her a lot, we have almost a sibling thing, but whenever we have an issue like we did in Deer Trace, I complain to Joanna gets with the developer, and magically it gets solved if they are parking on both sides of the streets. And we usually handle that at department head meetings, like this morning. So it does get notice and get towed to, and if it does happen more often than not, then Mr. Carter, and actually his superiors, I would make a phone call to them and they would increase their parking enforcement in that general area is how I call it. So it does get handled.
Thank you.
Mayor, I don't know if you want to touch on Deer Trace development with some traffic issues, and then we had to get a hold of the developer and say, by the way, you're in non-compliance.
Do you need Cumberland Trace?
No, the subdivision just west or north of Windstar.
The Bluffs at Youngs Creek?
Excuse me, Bluffs at Youngs Creek.
I'm just making sure which one.
Early on, during the starting of construction, there was a little bit of concern, and Mark and myself and Joanna, we got with the developer, and it was taken care of.
Okay.
And was they more than one complaint, every single complaint, and Kenny was part of that.
I was.
As a councilman, we just want to get on the record, if somebody calls for a councilman, a representative, or the mayor, we immediately go try to address the issues, because we're all in this together. So with the Bluffs at Youngs Creek, early on, there was some concerns, and then it got straightened out, and if you drive through there now, I think you'll see that the houses are nice, the lots are nice size, and the traffic is working pretty well, so. But there was a few issues that were fixed and taken care of. Does that answer your?
It did, thank you.
Is there, Julie, do you have any questions?
I do not,
Okay.
No, I think everyone has the same concerns. I mean, same concerns as the citizens who live out there. So, but I think with if the commitments are spelled out and are part of the ordinance, I think at this point, I think it's something that I could be on board with.
Is there any questions or concerns that we can air it out right now with the developer that's here?
The only thing I want to say is I know we have a very responsive mayor, and if there are issues that are occurring if we do approve this, he would be happy to take your phone call. I mean, he answers complaints all the time, so, I feel like he would do everything he could to fix whatever problem you were having. But that also being said, is we are in an area that real estate is hard to come by right now. There's only like 10 or 11 listings of homes even listed in Franklin right now. So there is a great need for additional housing, which is, I'm sure everybody's aware of that, so. That is another component that goes into my decision process.
Thank you for the compliment, but I'm gonna take the call, since I'm gonna do everything in my power.
I just threw you under the bus there.
Any other council questions, comments?
Mark, let's talk for just, I want to add, let's talk about the thickness of the streets, the traffic with the two roads. That'll be taking care of the traffic coming in and out of the subdivision.
Yeah, it'll meet city standards. We have standards for arterial streets, we have standards for local streets, and in between. So it'll have to meet those standards, and that's the way every subdivision street is built today. It's roughly, I'm going to say 7 inches of asphalt over 6 inches of stone.
Thank you.
Anybody else? If not, I think it comes time for a motion from someone. You want to do that, Kenny?
What do I say?
Hey, her eyes got real big.
No, I said Kenny. I don't know.
So Common Council Ordinance 21-03, an ordinance rezoning certain property to RS2 with commitments to include A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and H be added to that. I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
So we have a motion by Mr. Austin and a second by Mr. Taylor. Ma'am, I'm going to ask for a roll call vote, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir. Mr. Austin?
Yes.
Mr. Blankenship?
Yes.
Mr. Cupid is not here. Ms. Jones?
Yes.
Ms. McGinnis?
Yes.
Mr. Rainierson?
Yes.
And Mr. Taylor?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Motion carries.
Joanne, will you present an amended ordinance? So,
You want to adopt it on the next meeting, or?
sure. Let's just adopt it on the next meeting.
You are the last party in the conference.
We'll adopt an amended ordinance. It's approved. We'll submit one for your signature at the next meeting, and then we'll publish it.
Thank you.
We'll have to amend it. It's like what you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll go on another public hearing. Item number 3, Common Council Budgetary Ordinance number 21-09, an additional appropriation ordinance grants federal supplies 830-002-200 in the amount of $7,156. Captain Carter.
Thank you, Mayor. We're seeking additional appropriation for that $7,156. This is a Justice Association grant that was started by Greenville Police Department for less lethal equipment. That's $7,000 to purchase less lethal and riot type equipment for the Greenville Police Department.
As introduced at the last meeting, so this is also a public hearing, and we will open it up for public hearing at this time. Is there anyone who wishes to speak or ask a question? Hearing none, we'll close the public hearing. Ready for the council?
Move to approve Common Council Budgetary Ordinance number 21-09.
Second.
We have a motion and a second by Mrs. McGinnis. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, thank you. Indeed, Cal.
Mayor, move to read new business by title only. Second.
Second by Mrs. Taylor. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, we'll go to item number 1. Common Council Resolution number 21-08, ERA confirmatory. Common Council Resolution number 2109, real property tax abatement. Common Council Resolution number 21-10, personal property tax abatement, Franklin Tech Park. Community Development Specialist, Dave Moss.
Yes, good evening. I have before you these 3 resolutions. They are part of a development that is proposed by Mac McNaught, who is here this evening, who would like to give you just a brief update on what he is doing. But essentially, this is for the expansion of the Isham facility that is currently at 180 Bartram Parkway over in the Franklin Tech Park. This will